think it's absolutely fine for people to break in and ask questions. Also, obviously, puts things in the chat, so the other folks from Placecube hopefully can pick up questions as they come up in the chat. If they need me, then obviously you can just interrupt and just ask. So just shout if you've got something to ask about. We're going to just take probably about half an hour to run through some slides and give you a sense of what have we been up to over the last few years. So we'll get into that now. So the agenda that we're going to follow, we'll start off with myself, giving you a bit of an overview. I just was aware that the last time we saw people in person was Local Gov Camp 2019, although we did do a session at the virtual Local Gov Camp 2020. But really, you know, it's been a long time coming to get back into these sorts of sessions. So we'll do an overview of what we've been doing, and then I'm going to hand over to Alex to do an overview of the View My Council Tax Bill cube that we built with Royal Borough of Greenwich, and then over to Will to talk about customer contact management and the proof of concept we've been doing with Amazon Connect. And then we'll come back to me to do a brief overview of the work we've been doing in the local digital fund project that Rugby have been leading on low-code waste services. And then after that, we'll then move on to this interactive workshop where we hope to get you to contribute, talking about the sorts of problems that you're dealing with, the most important things that are on your plate, and what cubes you might need from an organisation like us. So let's get into the first session, the overview and an update on what we've been doing. I think it's fair to say that we've been pretty quiet over the last 2 years. We're not working in the open as much as I'd like to, and it's time to start talking about what we've been up to, how we've put Digital Place into action in a lot of new councils between 2020 and now. So I'm going to start with this brief overview of what Digital Place for local public services is, and then summarise what we've been doing with our customers on the platform. So for those of you who haven't come across it before, the inspiration for the Digital Place platform came out of my experiences leading digital transformation in Bristol between 2014 and 17, where we used Liferay to build a range of integrated open source digital services and to migrate our website. And following that, Placecube built Camden's new website in 2018, at the same time as I was helping Paul Maltby and Linda O'Halloran set up a local digital declaration. And it was obvious from that work that the appetite for councils to reuse well-designed open source services was there all across the country. But all too often, councils just weren't able to pick up the code or tailor it to local policies and systems or run it themselves operationally. So there seemed to be a gap. And in 2019, I joined with a number of other colleagues to launch Placecube and this idea of Digital Place to try and bring this proposition to life, so we can enable councils to use the power of a full digital experience platform in the form of Liferay, which is shown here as the grey foundation layer, but at the same time removing the cost and the effort of having to build all of the local government features that councils need by providing all of the pre-built cubes that we'd already developed with previous clients. So things like the styles and components and templates in the content management system that would help you to make an accessible council website, and digital services like Report to Repair or Book to Register a Birth, and core features like case management and integrations like the Northgate Revs and Bends or Civica CX connectors. And those are all shown in the coloured cubes on top of that sort of foundation. And then perhaps the biggest potential of the platform, as we see it, comes through this ecosystem that's shown in the cloud. So all the new cubes that we co-design and build with customers now and in the future. And as that library of open source cubes grows, we make them all available as part of the ongoing subscription to all customers and deploy them in new releases and manage all of the day-to-day operations of the cloud-hosted platform. So you don't need to have a full DevOps culture and team to take advantage of the platform. So that was a pitch that we took out to councils in 2019. Katie and I spent a lot of the time that year on the road, visiting all sorts of places around the country. And our whole aim was to offer this new alternative that if you were unhappy with the current options of separate proprietary forms packages and content management systems and CRM systems, and you were reliant on maybe one or two staff who'd hand-coded integrations with some sort of the risks that if they left, you wouldn't know how to maintain those things. But you at the same time couldn't afford to take the great open source sort of loosely coupled services route that Hackney had pioneered. you could instead choose to adopt Digital Place and get the best of both worlds. And I think it's fair to say that it struck a chord with many councils. But obviously, shortly after that, the first wave of COVID-19 hit, the lockdown and the pivot that councils had to perform to mobilise their local responses to the really urgent needs of their communities meant that our conversations pretty much stopped for a period of time. But then councils began to gain confidence that their grip on this new work was firm enough, and they were able to begin to look up and over the horizon again. And a lot of them could see, obviously, that the effects of the pandemic just underlined the importance of service design and data and digitally enabled service delivery. So control over their own platforms and the ability to create new services quickly and at low cost were even more important. So Royal Borough of Greenwich and Rugby Borough Council both joined us as customers in summer 2020, followed in the autumn by Dorset and Brentwood councils. So to give you a summary of what we've been up to between 2020 and summer 21, we worked closely together with the new customers we would gain, discovering and designing and developing new digital services for residents and council staff. And we supported council web teams to migrate their main websites over to Digital Place and to build new microsites to support things like local economic development sites and public health and local health and social care recruitment sites. Now, some of our customers were working very openly at this point in time, sharing the challenges and successes of our projects with them. Some of you may have read Neil's blog posts about the Dorset website migration project. And if you haven't, then do go and find them, because it's a great summary of the blood, sweat and tears involved in migrating a complex site. Along the way, we also helped Camden to create new digital services for business grants and self-isolation test and trace payments through our case management cube. And we provided DevOps support to Bristol City Council to ensure their website continued to provide access to services through the pandemic. And we also did things like supporting the Charity Commission of England and Wales to develop and launch their register of charities. So it was a pretty busy year. Moving into 2021, we welcomed a number of new councils to Digital Place. London Borough of Sutton and Royal Borough of Kingston worked with us to migrate Sutton's website across from their legacy platform, which had a beta in November that year, and then a full live site in early 22. And we reused the automated migration tools that we built with Dorset, but tailored them to work with the Jardoo platform. And in fact, we've been reusing them again with Rugby this summer. And then the next councils to join us, Lewis District Council and Eastbourne Borough Council, started working with us to develop a taxi licensing applications cube, which has given us the opportunity to build on some of the user research that the local digital funded Discovery project did, and also Rushmore Council's alpha work. And then Northumberland signed up to Digital Place and then quickly joined with Dorset and Rugby to collaborate on a new iteration of customer contact management, which added further capabilities to that, which will help Northumberland to adopt it to replace their legacy Lagan CRM. And obviously we'll talk a bit more about that later. So this year, alongside the projects to develop customer contact management, we've also released a number of new integration cubes, including gov.uk Pay and the Whitespace waste management system. And we also began a major new upgrade to Digital Place, which was accelerated by the work that we did alongside Rugby, Dorset, Northumberland, Kingston, Sutton on low-code waste services, and with London Borough of Redbridge on housing tenancy management. Both of those were local digital funded projects. And I'll talk a bit more about the waste management later on. And as we completed these projects and tested and deployed the new services or features, we followed by merging the code into the core platform. And so you can see various cubes appearing through the year with a short lag after the original council went live. So I appreciate that was a pretty whirlwind tour. As I said, I'll come back to the low code developments a bit later. But now I'd like to hand over to two of our customers so you can hear in their own words a bit more of an insight into the projects that they've been involved in. Will McLean from Northumberland is going to speak about the CCM and account enhancements and the Amazon Connect proof of concept. But first, Alex Douglas from Greenwich will take you through the design and development of the View My Council Tax Bill service.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. So yeah, I obviously just introduced myself before, but my name's Alex. I'm one of the senior product managers at Greenwich. I've been working there for about a year now, but I will share the whole story of the work that's been done since 2020 to modernise and transform the council tax service for residents, working with Placecube to build this portal that you can see some screenshots of here, and I'll talk a bit about in a minute. but I'll begin by talking a bit about the decisions we made to start with council tax service, because obviously at the moment there's a lot of work happening right across the council, but back in 2020 there was a new digital strategy launched, and council tax was really the first service that we chose to start with, and that was because of the potential impact of the work. It was very clear to us at the time. The first work stream of our strategy is about having a relentless focus on resident needs, and so developing a modern council tax service obviously unlocks value for our residents, staff and the council as a whole. As everyone here knows, council tax obviously is the backbone of revenue collection for councils. It's a high volume service, and in a borough like Greenwich, around 60% of our 250,000 homes are rentals, so there's a high turnover in the service as well. And our aim really was to improve the key interactions a resident would have with the service via a new front end, in a way that would allow our back office staff to focus their energy and skills on making the service as reliable and effective as possible. And kind of on the side of that as well, council tax is obviously an important way to communicate our intentions to be user-centred to our residents, because it's the first and in some cases the only council service some residents will ever interact with. So we felt it made sense to stake our kind of intention for future transformation here. So yeah, back in 2020 when we started, there was no online environment for our residents to interact with for council tax, apart from a few web forms they could get on the website, but those just produced responses into a mailbox, much like sending an email. And so our back office were dealing with a large backlog of resident inquiries. I think it was in the low thousands. There was a really poor response time for residents, and so yeah, the appetite for change was really quite big at that point. And so yeah, we developed a sort of a vision for this technology transformation work, which was all around developing this new front door for the service, but crucially one that we could control and take responsibility for to ensure that it was meeting user needs. And really we were kind of driving towards autonomy and ownership of the system that then could be joined up via kind of an API structure to a back-end system. So currently we're using the Capital One Database Academy, but the key point would be that we could develop it in line with our wishes and our vision, but it has the potential to join up with any back-end system that could be used in the future, using a suite of APIs to kind of couple and decouple flexibly as the needs of the council would demand. So what have we built? Well, the middle screen is the key thing to look at here. This is with Placecube, we developed this sort of lightweight and modular cube on top of which we're developing other little portlets and bits of functionality. And that is the initial, what we released back in December 2021. So essentially for residents, there's a very simple account creation process. And after they do that, a resident can then attach their property to the account via an API lookup in Academy. And once they've done that, they get that view that you see there. So that's the kind of summary information of their account. It includes their balance, views of the active and previous financial years, and the payments that they've made to date. They can see their payment schedule, any discounts or exemptions they might have, and their arrears if it's relevant. But the relevance point is quite important. So we wanted to make the view context aware. So it only displays views of the data that are actually relevant to them. Like you're not going to see anything about arrears if you don't have any. And so, yeah, with the latest data we have from April of this year, we've had in those 4 months, we had about 10,000 accounts created. And it's quite encouraging because the figures were showing that those figures were doubling every month. So yeah, it kind of showed us why we should continue to prioritize this development work. And that was the baseline of the online account functionality. And then following that, we prioritized building with Placecube an online application for the direct debit service. That was a paper process previously, and it was taking back office staff obviously up to about 10 minutes to complete each request manually in Academy. But now residents make the application directly through their online account. That request is written directly into Academy using another API. And though, yeah, our back office staff still have to approve each one, but it now would take seconds rather than minutes. And there's no further need for a backlog at all. And yeah, a really important part of that direct debit service that we built was including a banking wizard that validates bank details. So now, again, we know that those bank details coming through are correct, which again reduces how much time staff are needing to invest in kind of contacting residents who submitted their application and might have got something wrong. So yeah, with the foundational work done, what does our roadmap now look like for future development? The next top priority piece we're working on at the moment is to develop a downloadable PDF version of the bill and developing an e-billing function as well. Obviously that has been done elsewhere, but we're again building it into this portal that we've got. Obviously the aim there is to reduce paper consumption in the council and push as much of the resident interaction online as possible. And both options will be available to the user through their account. Obviously this is dependent on getting the APIs set up, working with Capita to do that. That can be quite a slow part of the process. So on the side, we've been developing another new piece of functionality, which is a new web form for residents who first move into the borough. So the driver for that piece was that we could pass new resident data directly into Academy to set up those new council tax records, and removing the need for it to be moved manually from a mailbox into the database. Again, we're doing this via an API, and hopefully in the future we would then be able to pass the data in and activate an automation module within Academy, which would then actually set the records up automatically as well. But developing that web form has really allowed us to focus again on designing a really user-centered form. We've been really intentional about what questions we're asking, are we collecting the right data in the right way, and developing the functionality that allows residents only to see the ones that are relevant to them. And we're using clear content, obviously, to manage their expectations about what the process is and how long it will take. So yeah, then they're not left in the dark, ringing the council for updates and contributing to that backlog, which at the moment is full of second contacts from residents who don't know what's going on. So yeah, once we've got the initial functionality of moving data into Academy to improve the time taken for residents to get their account set up, we'd hope to start joining up some of these functionality pieces that we've already developed. So, enabling them to apply for e-billing as part of their moving in journey and so on. But beyond that, our roadmap's quite open. We've got the intention to look at transforming the other resident web forms for council tax in line with what we've just done with Move into Greenwich. But we're also looking, for instance, at the exemptions and discounts workflow. The vision for service transformation is really that our residents ultimately can choose to make every interaction with the council around their council tax happen online rather than on the phone or through paper processes. And that's about it for what I wanted to show you, but I'm happy to take any questions now or later about what we've done.
Thanks very much, Alex. Are there any questions right now? If not, feel free to put them in the chat and we can pick them up as we go through. I guess the other thing just to underline, which I mentioned, but I know I was going at 100 miles an hour. So obviously every piece of work we do with the customer is then contributed to the platform and it's open sourced. So, the value of what we're trying to do here is that when you've got well-designed services that a council like Greenwich has invested that time into the user research, the content design, etc., and user experience design, you can look at that and trust that it's actually something that's going to meet user needs. And then obviously it being in the platform means that people can reuse it in other councils. So thanks very much. And I'm going to move on then to ask Will McLean to talk through the work we've been doing with Northumberland.
Thanks, Gavin, and thanks, Alex, as well, for that insight into the Revs and Bends system there. So I'm going to zoom right out to start off with and just talk about some of the problems that we have within Northumberland, just overall and digitally. We are probably the most sparsely populated and rural county in the country from a council perspective, followed very closely in second place by our southwesterly twins in Dorset. And this engagement with Placecube has brought us very close indeed in terms of working together. So, and that's the benefit, I guess, at the moment, is that geographical borders no longer matter, because of course the pandemic suddenly forced us all to go digital, go remote, go online, which ironically is probably one thing that we're trying to do to the way that we engage with our residents, that channel shift we talk about. It isn't easy necessarily for some of our residents to come and speak to us face to face, even though that's how they probably would have done, and how we were pretty much set up to speak to our residents was very much that paper-based face-to-face process. And when I joined the council about just over 18 months ago, and the relevance of that is the fact that my very first day, whilst I was onboarding, I was plonked in front of a large screen, and we had a meeting with Placecube, and that was our first ever chat with them. So I'm very much, I've lived this journey with Placecube and Katie and Gavin and team. Our customer service contact center had this need to replace our aging CRM system, which Gavin alluded to. On top of that, also our CMS, our website solution, was sort of fast approaching an unusable stage. So we had quite a lot going on, and we also, before I started, replacing our actual telephony system within the contact center with Amazon's Connect, which is where Adrian comes into this and also joined the call. So we're not making life easy for ourselves. We've got a hell of a lot going on, but why not? So we were talking to lots of different suppliers with regards to replacing the CRM, and Placecube was one of those people we spoke to, and we were wowed and wooed by the probably additional functionality in terms of customer experience, which is our main thing, and probably seemed as madness to some, and certainly to a lot of my colleagues, that we're replacing a CRM solution with Placecube, where the CRM, or CCM, the Customer Contact Management Cube in their case, is just the iteration 1, working with one customer, Rugby Borough Council. So, and this is talking about an organisation, Northumberland, which is very much used to getting solutions from third parties off the shelf, and you just plug it in and away you go, and probably realise a little bit later that this doesn't quite do what we wanted it to do, and if we want to actually make some changes, then we need to stump up a lot of cash and wait about 18 months for the likes of Capita, Civica, Northgate to actually then implement those changes. And they're not really bothered about us as customers. We're just there to pay them the money and get this solution that we kind of put a lot of bolt-ons and workarounds to get into. So one of the reasons why, and it's probably quite a ballsy move to some extent, was that we're trying to help our own organisation understand the benefits of working in a more modern, iterative approach. So whilst it might seem a little bit counterintuitive to go in with an early version of a CCM cube, it gave us really that opportunity to help build and influence the cube and the solution to fit our needs. And what was quite interesting is, I think Gavin alluded to, so Rugby helped with the initial iteration. But whilst as local authorities, as councils, we all work together, got talked about the digital declaration, we don't compete with each other. The needs of Rugby, for example, compared to Dorset and Northumberland would be quite different. So to get all of us around the table and start looking at how we might want to improve and move on this, the CCM solution, was probably bringing a lot of new things to the table in terms of how we want to engage with our residents and how they need to engage with us. So we've probably now, since just before Christmas, been working with Placecube onto this CCM solution. And you can see some of the screenshots there with them, bearing in mind that whilst we've sort of signed with Placecube, sound like some sort of great football announcement there, signed with Placecube for the next 2 seasons. We're spending a lot of time in the background building the foundations for the CCM cube and the CMS and everything that goes with it. So the benefit of doing that as well, one thing we were really quite keen to have was, from a purely selfish internal perspective, I mentioned earlier that we were very much used to just dealing with big third-party suppliers and patching and maintaining that from an IT perspective. This is a really good opportunity to to sort of take that voyage into the low-code open source technologies, which enables our developers to actually build stuff themselves with that, I guess, almost it's like having stabilizers with this low-code open source opportunity, and mixing and talking to other councils as well, really helping us broaden our skill sets and understanding. So that's why Placecube will talk about this collaborative approach, working with cubes, and then that just gets deployed to all users, which is brilliant. And this is where we've been having some good chats with Alex and her colleagues at Greenwich as well, which I'll touch on very shortly. But also, as well as that Placecube conversation, we've just been able to get around the table with Dorset as our sort of almost geographical, topographical and political neighbour, just to say, how do you do things with your elections? How do you do things with data? What about your connectivity? So it's been really beneficial from that point of view as well. And we know we've got an awful lot to do in terms of how we some low-hanging fruit to improve our engagement with residents. So our sort of 3 or 4 big areas that we know the customer contact centre get inundated with calls about: council tax revs and bends, which Alex has talked about earlier, waste services, which we're going to talk about in a bit later. So it's all very coincidental and it's all worked out quite nicely for us. Housing, which is something that we're coming perhaps down the line. So these big areas where we're thinking, right, we need to do better to be more digitally present and help our residents engage with us. We know that they're coming down the line, and that's something that we're going to be able to start working on. We need to create our own roadmap at Northumberland in terms of our cubes and how we what comes next, because we've talked about it a lot with our services, and now we've almost got this queue of heads of service coming to us saying, please Placecube us, when can we get on board? But obviously we need to have a very pragmatic approach to that. But the great thing is we know that we've got revs and bends that we want to sort of get on board soon, but we've had a good chat with Alex and her colleague Jamie and our revs and bends team just to sort of check in, see what's going on, how it's developing. And we know that once this has been deployed, it's then there for us to be able to benefit from, albeit a Greenwich flavoured, but let's be honest, it's revs and bends. It's not a massive, it's not going to be a huge difference to how we want to do things. So, and because of that low code, open source way of doing things, if we need to make some tweaks to suit our own needs, we can do. So loads of great things there for us, and we're looking forward to sort of reaping the benefits from those. And it's been a really useful experience actually to engage with Placecube as that sort of modern iterative organization. Really, it's been good for us, and I think it's been a bit of a wake-up call for some of our colleagues in a totally beneficial way. And with all due respect, for us to now go into that sort of iterative approach. I think this is, just to be perfectly honest, for anyone thinking about this, some of our colleagues and developers have kind of taken a bit of time to get used to that mindset of not necessarily knowing what you're going to develop, and that sort of emerging as you speak to users and as you understand what's going on. And we obviously created this big backlog of user needs that we needed for our contact center. But now we've joined the table with Rugby and Dorset. There's their considerations to think about as well. So that was a really interesting experience for us in terms of negotiating the priorities and understanding where we go and why we go. But once we sort of cap off what we're developing in this next iteration, that doesn't mean that's it. We know that there's more coming down the line, and that's been quite a bit of a mind shift change for some of our colleagues here. But the other good thing that's been going on, and you sort of seen that bottom left-hand side image here, is I talked about we've been completely redoing our contact center from a physical aging system to Amazon's cloud-based Connect, and so these two programs of work were running in parallel with each other, but we didn't really want to then have our customer service colleagues almost sort of swivel chairing from one CCM solution to the contact center solution when that comes in place. So we're currently, we're nearing the end of a proof of concept with Placecube and Amazon to integrate the two. So you can see Smart Agent, which is the sort of user interface for which we use with Amazon Connect, we're embedding the two into each other so that our contact center staff have got everything they need in front of them when they're speaking to customers, that will then be able to draw the data, pull up the screens to see who they're speaking to, and anything they entered gets pushed back into the Placecube environment for those services to be able to pull on as well. So we are pretty much nearing the end of our our first engagement with Placecube for their CCM, but their second iteration, and we've got until the end of this financial year for all of that to drop in, so plenty of time, but we know we've got a lot of work to do between now and then just to get our own shop in order, really. But it's been a useful experience, and one that we really look forward to getting our teeth stuck into with more stuff with Placecube and Greenwich and Dorset and everyone else that comes on board, really, because this is what it's all about. You know, the digital declaration that Gavin talked about, the more people who come on board, the more we can benefit from it, and the less we kind of feel we're hamstrung by some of the larger organizations that develop some of these things. And what I will just finish with, because I've been wittering on for quite a while, is I guess it's important to appreciate here that what Placecube is doing is creating those integrations, those connections, that interface with the services and the solutions that you have. So this isn't necessarily going to be replacing your Capita Revs and Bends solution or your Northgate housing solution, which a lot of people kind of were under the impression of. This is just creating that one consistent customer experience so that when our users come onto our website and want to check their council tax or log a repair for the housing or see what day the bin's coming, they're not then going out to another third-party site and getting a little bit confused about the interface and the way it looks. It's all there in one place, that we are creating that experience for them, and hopefully making it a much more enjoyable experience when it comes to needing to tell us something, ask us for something, or whatever that bit may be. So yeah, exciting times ahead for us, and I could go on for ages, but I won't. So yeah, that's probably where we're at the moment, and thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Will. Just to pick up on your last point there, actually, and just sort of underline it, that you know, part of what we're doing here as we build these things is releasing sort of iteratively, as Will said. So this wasn't like a complete sort of a 6-month development and then releasing a large block of code at the end. There have been 2 or 3 releases through this period of time, and individual features that are on these screens came out in those different releases, so that, you know, we might have released kind of ability to show what someone's known as name is during one release, and then in the next release we might have released the ability to integrate the emails. So bit by bit we're releasing these features, and as we go on through, we sort of finish this major sort of collaborative project, but then as we go on into the future with our sort of product team, we'll be doing more individual features. We may well then institute another sort of big chunk of work with a council, whether that's Northumberland or others. But generally, it's an ongoing process, that sometimes has these big bursts of releases.
Gavin, sorry, if I could just quickly input there. I was going to try and keep my talk solution agnostic in terms of what we're trying to replace, but Gavin did mention Lagan up front, and I think one thing that is, but just to be really honest about this, what we've tried to not fall in the trap of is just replace Lagan with what Placecube do, replace the functionality. So whilst I think some of our user needs or some of our sort of functions that we wanted may have been flavored by, well, this is what we did with Lagan, so great. What has been useful about engaging with Placecube and Dorset and Rugby and everyone else is that you get that constructive sort of challenge, or, oh, you do it like that, do you? Well, we do it like this. And that's helped us sort of think, yeah, why do we do it like that? Just because we've always done that. And hey, how often do we hear in our day jobs? Well, that's because that's how we've always done it. So it's been useful to have that that different insight as well, and do this in a slightly more collaborative way.
Absolutely, thanks, Will. And again, so we see our role is to try to identify the commonality. So we obviously are hearing every individual council's sort of list of needs or requirements. We're trying to see what the commonality is, And we then try and play that back to everybody as, okay, you've all said you want to do X. We think that's the same thing. And let's try and do some discovery work on it. And it is, as Will has mentioned, often it is a bit challenging, and you can have workshops which are quite sort of crunchy, as it were, because you go through challenging people's preconceptions and expectations, and if you're doing that with 3 or 4 councils at the same time, you can end up having to go through that process before you get to the end and begin hopefully to get people onto the same page. And again, trying to get some user research in there has been obviously valuable, because once you start actually asking users from each council area, you often find that they say very similar things, and then you can start to sort of evidence that there is some commonality. So I think that's a good point to move on to the low-code waste services, which is another collaborative project. So I'm going to quickly run through this in a few minutes, and then we'll move on to the interactive part. So this is a project that's been funded by the round 5 of the Local Digital Fund, with a cast of thousands in terms of our council partners that have been helping us with this. So one of the things that we like to do as an SME company that's trying to scale up and serve more customers is we're very motivated to try and do the right thing by our customers and to listen very openly to their feedback about the platform. So whilst our customers value the open source and open standards and open API sort of features of Digital Place and the full control that the development capabilities give you, it's also fair to say that I think every council now is interested in how comprehensive the low code elements of the platform are. This is becoming more and more important to people. So through the summer of 2021, working with several of our customers, we were recognizing that they were looking for enhancements to the low code tools in Digital Place, and that we could work collaboratively to develop them and demonstrate their value by building some shared patterns for services that lots of councils would benefit from. This idea again that we can try and find the common core and then share it across all councils. And we sort of kicked that around for a few months. That led to the proposal to the round 5 of the Local Digital Fund, which Rugby led, to focus on low code waste services. While we were waiting for that project to go through the sort of evaluation and approval and funding to be allocated, Placecube put a development team in place to work on a new user interface to our case management cube to make it easier to create case types and configure workflows. And then following that, we began work on a major upgrade to the underlying LifeRay DXP platform that's embedded within Digital Place, which brings together enhancements to the form builder. So it supports the kind of rules and calculations needed for many local government services. And then once the low code waste services project was funded, we put together a team, including a business analyst, user researcher, and technical architect alongside our developers. And we gathered in all of the prior work on waste services by the partner councils. So we got kind of process maps across 4 or 5 different councils for every single service in the waste area. Looked at the similarities and differences between them. Tried to identify where there were automated steps, where there were integrations with the waste management systems. And then we tried to draw out user insights that helped us to produce some low fidelity wireframes to guide the form building. So this wasn't like a full UX design piece, but it was essentially trying to get what's the common core. And that's sort of shown in the left-hand side of the screen, where we kind of pulled those things together in a report. And of course, as with all the local digital projects, this will all be published openly. We're wrapping up at the moment. So our aim with getting all that information together was then to design a common core and see where services then needed to pivot away from that core to take account of variations in policy or sourcing arrangements, or whether things like in-cab devices were available. So, all of those points needed to be supported by configurable low-code components so that a council could take the cube, but then tailor it easily to their circumstances. So if you didn't have an in-cab device, for instance, you just simply remove that part of the form and move to the next step. So once we had that kind of sense of of what we needed to support, then our technical architect could then ensure that all the low-code components were designed and available for each part of the process, and the integration connectors were defined to be built for each council's waste management system, so we could expose all of the services from that system, so that form builders could then use them. And indeed, so we could actually build exemplar forms as part of the project. And over the past 6 months, we've been sort of showing the thing, as it were, at the end of every sprint. And indeed, tomorrow is our final Sprint 10 show and tell. So do feel free, if you want to sign up at the Waste Services microsite, which is wasteservices.digital, where you can watch the previous show and tells too. So all of those enhancements that we've been building are part of the imminent Digital Place version 3 release, which we're working on through a series of release candidates and testing this month. We're expecting to have a final version of that ready for testing customers by the end of the month. So that's a quick run through of the low-code waste services project. So I think I'll just take a pause there before we move on to the workshop section, just see if there's any questions from anybody about anything that Will shared or that I've shared there.
Can I ask a question, Gavin?
Of course you can, Nick.
Yeah, so it's I guess it's both to Will and Alex around the organisation's willingness to get involved with, I guess, what is a sort of local government as a platform type approach, because obviously most local authorities over the last number of years have been used to buying sort of point solutions, and especially procurement. We find it very easy to procure, you know, one thing that's going to deal with one particular issue. But what you're talking about here is a set of cubes and a platform that you can obviously alter and that are malleable to different problems and situations. So just wanted to ask both Will and Alex how their organisations, how receptive they were, and if there were any particular issues when sort of communicating what you're up to.
Good question. Alex, do you want to, I suppose, I mean, I was involved with the procurement of it, so I'm not sure if Alex, if you would have been necessarily from a Greenwich perspective. So yes, it's a very good point, Nick, and it was tempted to say almost surprisingly easy in comparison, but it's never easy, the whole procurement process, as Katie will well know as well, because I think it took a best part of a year almost. But that wasn't really anything to do with having to help convince the organization. It was more the NAF process and paperwork that supports that, really. And ultimately, if I'm going to be brutally honest, I think more it was how the numbers stacked up that was all that was really scrutinized. My boss, Chris, the IT director, and myself come from a similar background. We're working with DWP and very much about this whole digital way of doing things and collaborative and sharing and modern. And I'm sure in some of those calls that we're having, people thinking, what the hell are these two on? They've got no idea. But you know, it's just that process, and even stacking up from the figures perspective, just for a CRM solution, it did enough to say, well, this is what customer services want and this will do it. There's an added benefit as well, by the way, that we're probably going to be able to revolutionize how we engage with our customers environmentally, with tree cutting, with all the other services. But there's just added bonuses. You just sit back and watch, and we'll show you. But even if it was just the CRM, then that's all we've done what the business case was stacked up to do. But so I think everything as we're going on to the other services will be added benefits. And already our Revs and Bens team, who are, I think, again, I don't think I'm being disrespectful here, but probably one of our least digitally savvy services, sat down with us and the conversation with Alex and James, and just like, wow, that's incredible. How much do we pay for that? Well, we don't, because we've already paid for Placecube, and it's part of the iterative cubes development. So, and then to have them turn around to the rest of the organization and go, wow, we can't wait to get on Placecube, that's probably helped. So yeah, I think it's going to be an iterative approach to that sort of winning the minds around, I think.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I wasn't involved with the procurement, so I'm not sure what those initial conversations looked like. But I think the thing that I'm noticing, just working with Placecube and then working with with kind of, well, so yeah, specifically the colleagues in Rebs and Bens is the ability to include those kind of council staff in those kind of design or even kind of user research conversations and decisions that we're making about the product. I think the feedback I'm getting is that they're really enjoying kind of actually being in the room and being able to like watch the process happen and then input as well, which I guess is just like a part of kind of agile development anyway. But I think that feels to me like the key thing, I suppose, as like the product manager, the key thing that we're getting that I guess you wouldn't have so much with the Capitas of the world or whatever. But that seems to be going down really, really well. Even if it is a bit slower or whatever, because, we're taking a lot more time with the design work than you would do. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks both. Jonathan's got his hand raised. Jonathan, are you there?
I am. Just a quick question for Will and Alex. How much engagement do you get from, I guess, the traditional sort of user space in the organization when it comes to actually developing using low code? Because one of the things we've been looking at with Placecube is being able to move what we'd be thinking of traditionally as development into more the users of the system so that they can mold their own processes and create their own forms and things like that.
Good question. Alex, I'll let you go first this time.
Well, I was going to ask, do you mean as in users, as in the actual kind of the staff in the service area or whatever who are using?
Yes, the staff, because we've got a mix of sort of like users and super users who tend to sort of do some kind of high level administration on the platform. And we kind of like them to be able to do more than they're doing at the moment, moving forwards.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, from our side, I don't think we've actually got quite there yet. But I imagine that is a step we'll go down, and we'll, yeah. I think sorry, I can't remember exactly what your question was, but I think that is something that's a possibility, but we're not doing it at the moment. Maybe Will, you might have something a bit more interesting to say than that.
Yeah.
Just to step in before Will, so most of the Greenwich Council tax work has been focused on building that account portlet, so that's been full development. Where they're moving on to the forms that Alex mentioned earlier, which is kind of the next stage after what we're currently working on. Those forms are using the more low code elements of the platform, and that's when you might consider then getting other people using them.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think from a Northumberland perspective, and some of this will depend on how, I guess, structurally how you're organised, Jonathan. So we have a fairly large IT department for what is sort of standard of about 120 people, but we have then amongst the services a lot of what we kind of term as shadow IT folk. So sysadmin people within local services, within housing, who aren't necessarily part of our organisational structure within IT, but they've been doing all of the regular engaging with their Capitas or Civicas or whoever to patch, maintain, and develop this. So, and now we're going to them and saying, probably more with our waste services, given the work that we've just been looking at on the screen here, saying, this is an opportunity for you to get involved with this, and this is how easy it is to amend the forms and the functionality and the flow behind that, and this is why we're doing it, and the user needs that are sort of driving that. So certainly much more functionality and ease within that respect, and we've got some of that to come, I think, because we are not on Placecube yet, if that makes sense. We haven't actually launched anything, so we've got that to come in terms of I guess training our colleagues to do that. And one example that we're looking at the moment is migrating our forms across from our current website and Lagan environment to what will be Placecube. We counted over 1,500 forms across the entire organization for our residents and colleagues to engage with, understanding how we can do things better with Placecube, and also getting rid of a lot of the dead wood. We've got now about 500 forms that we'll be using, so an immense amount of progress in that space, and less to maintain from our point of view, but equally it'll give us the opportunity to say, and look, this isn't scary, this is how we built it, and this is how you can build it. So you don't need to necessarily come to us and go, can I have this question added on this form please, and wait 4 months because we're so busy. It's a case of, this is how it's built, and it is that it might take a bit of getting used to, like anything new does, but and some of it is just actually trying to get other services within the council to take responsibility for that as well. So yeah, I think I hope that has answered your question, but equally happy for you to.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's broadly analogous to sort of where we're coming from, because we're a fairly new unitary. We're aggregating the old legacy councils that once made up our patch. So we've got 4 different CRM systems to dispense with and replace with a new one. And at the same time as that, we've got disaggregation going for all of the previous county services. So we've got like half of Northampton County Council services to disaggregate as well. So there's a large number of forms and large number of services and lots of potential deduplication to be done. Yeah, we don't want to be doing it all in IT.
Yeah, not surprised. I don't envy you.
I think this is where as I said earlier at the beginning of this low code section, listening to our customers, we could recognise what additional enhancements they needed, and that's what we spent the last sort of 6 months working on. And version 3 will incorporate all these new improvements that have been based on really trying to understand what customers need. Most of the councils who've adopted the platform have started with websites or CCM or Council Placecube, etc. And I think most of them are then going to be moving on with us over the next year onto digital services migrations.
CCM looks so much more developed than when we first talked.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the email integration that's come in, a whole range of new features in the kind of customer profile view, relationships between customers, that sort of thing, and of course all of that's mirrored in the account as well, so that as an individual you can edit your account, and that's a two-way process between customer services officers and the individual self-service user. Although obviously the more people can use the self-service, the less they hopefully will be making phone calls. So unless there's anyone else, I'm going to move on to the more interactive part to use the next sort of 30 minutes. Is there any other questions left?